As many of you will know, I've just had a new course published by Chessable on the Sicilian Kalashnikov. Let me just get to the starting position. So I'm marking the publication of this course by showing a series of games with the Kalashnikov. And I want to introduce you to some of the main themes and show you some beautiful games as well. So we're going to be looking at a game between Kuparadze and Richard Rapport, one of the most exciting players in the elite today. He's breaking into the top 10. Many of you have been asking about this move c4, and this is, along with knight c3, the most popular move at this point, and saying, isn't this a problem for black? Because surely it clamps down on black's d5 break. Well, to some extent, yes. I've already shown some really nice games with this, actually, where black does achieve that break. But I think the main problem, actually, is that this d4 square is weakened, and black can exploit that on many occasions. So that's what we're going to look at here in this game. Just coming back, the move order in this game was very strange. This was played in the World Blitz Championship in 2017. So white played knight e2. Well, that transposes to a normal position. And Rapport actually played e6 here. So it starts out as a Taimanov. Now it goes into a Morozzi bind. The d5 break is clamped. Knight is driven back, g6, bishop f4, e5, bishop e3, and now we've transposed back into a known position in the Kalashnikov. So let me give you the move order of this via Kalashnikov. I hope this doesn't confuse you too much. So this would be the Kalashnikov move order. So c4 here. Bishop e6, and I like this fianchetto. I think this is a really nice system against this Morozzi bind, because very often this bishop comes into play on the long diagonal. It's a really dynamic way of playing for black, as we're about to see. Okay, so here we go. Normal here for white actually is to cover the d4 square with knight a3 and put the knight on c2, and this is one of the starting positions. You'll find actually in the Kalashnikov playlist on the channel, you'll find two games I've already looked at from this position. There's Anand against Magsudlu and Pichot against Giri, and those two games are absolutely wonderful. Beautifully played by the players of the black pieces. Magsudlu crushed Anand. Giri did the same to Pichot. So do check those out. You'll find links to that Kalashnikov playlist down there in the video description. But anyway, coming back to this game, this is where we are in this game. And instead of this normal move, knight a3 to c2 to cover d4, Kuparadze played knight d5 immediately, just occupying d5. So there is now a threat to play bishop b6 and knight c7 check. So that's why this knight had to be exchanged off. And now here is a really important moment that is so typical for the Kalashnikov. Piece is exchanged on d5, the knight is attacked, and the knight has a choice. Do you go back to e7 or maybe b8? Or do you leap forward? Well, I call this the Trojan horse. Black gives up a pawn, but actually this just frees black's pieces. And this is such a typical idea. This pawn sacrifice on d4 with knight d4. The Trojan horse, you will see it so often in the Kalashnikov. So, of course, white does not have to take that knight. It's possible to sort of avoid the exchange, but not many people like to live with a knight on d4. That can be really uncomfortable, and this knight can swing round to c5 anyway. It's a kind of King's Indian position actually, but black has this knight embedded on d4. So let's come back here. So knight d4, in this case white decides to take the pawn, and it's a free pawn, it's a clear pawn. Bishop g7. Well, what has black got for it? Well, it's basically all about the dark squares. Just watch that bishop. It's going to fly. Castles, castles. Rook e8. So this is the first threat in the game. Knight takes pawn on e4, obviously using the discovered attack on the queen. So the queen has to step back. And now a strong move is knight d7 straight away actually. Looking perhaps to play knight c5, and well, there's even a threat to take that pawn on e4. You'll notice that bishop is not a good piece. Sort of blocked in by its own pawns. That is a real problem here. And these dark squares, well, basically white cannot contest the dark squares here. So knight d7 is a nice move, and also preparing rook c8, queen b6. But queen b6, as played by Rapport in the game, also very strong. Looking down at b2, looking down the diagonal at the king and f2, and again it's all on the dark squares. Rook b1, rook c8. So that rook looks at the knight, and in fact both minor pieces have a problem here. That knight is just looking at its own pieces, it's looking at the bishop, but it hasn't got anywhere good to go to, and that bishop is still blocked in by its own pawns and treads on the toes of the queen as well. So this is a lot of fun for black. a3, well, that covers the b4 square, but I think is kind of indicative that white does not have a plan. Knight d7, and the final piece spins into play. So you can see every single one of black's pieces is in play and is threatening. The rook's on open files. The knight can come to either e5 or c5. The bishop, queen. I mean, what a position. What a bargain. For one pawn. This is absolutely beautiful. Bishop g4. Well, that's a pin, but of course the knight spins away and hits the queen. The rook is attacked, so the queen defends the bishop. The rook's attacked, so rook c4. Well, looks really nice. Bishop e2, and now the rook invades. Again, it's all on dark squares. So remember, white gave up that dark squared bishop. And this just makes life a lot of fun for black. So the knight looking to spin around to c5. Maybe look at that one. Or maybe go into b3. b4 prevents that, but look at the knight on c3. Now no longer has protection from a pawn, so rook c8 is kind of a gift of a move, and that pin is pretty nasty. The queen steps out of the way, but the rook goes further. And you can see with the rook and the queen looking at the f2 square, plus the bishop on g7 and rook on c8 looking at the knight on c3, white is in a lot of trouble. Yeah, threat here, but also potential threat to the bishop too. So the knight comes to a4. Now that is not a beautiful square. Knights on the rim are grim and dim and all the rest of them. Springe am Rande, bring Kummer und Schande. Yeah, it's pretty desperate for white already, and the bishop is attacked. So bishop g4 hits the knight again, but this time black has a winning move. f5 is just too strong. Of course, if that's taken, then here, then queen takes bishop. So the bishop has just stepped back to h3. And rook c2. The rooks have invaded. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. You can see how, white started off this game dominating the centre with that pawn on c4. And what a transformation. Black's pieces have invaded. Well, white's pieces are sort of forced to the side. You know, it's some kind of weird centrifugal force has spun white's pieces to the side of the board. And black has invaded into the space that's created. And now f2 is under fire. I mean, what a beautiful position. Rook d1. Queen takes. Well, there wasn't much to be done, but this is a nice move, of course. Let's just have a quick look. If rook takes, check, and of course it's forced mate. Very fittingly, you know, bishop d4 check, that crucial d4 square, a dark square. So king h1, incredibly, white actually manages to limp on in this position. b5, that's a nice move. You'd imagine that it's going to be mate at the other end of the board, but actually all black is doing is just trapping that knight. It has no square to go to. And the rest of the game was a bit of an anticlimax, really. Sound technique from Rapport, who just made sure that this queen isn't really doing anything. In fact, black's pieces still defend here. Queen d6, rook e2 threatening mate, rook e1. And the sad end to this game was simply a completely lost endgame. Black a piece up. And if that's taken, then the a-pawn steams down the board, takes. And here, white resigned. There we go, not before time really. The a-pawn is going through. Well, I just really like that game. I think this one is good to remember, that in these systems with c4 and e4, this Maróczy bind, so often black has the opportunity to play the knight into d4, the Trojan horse, and if that pawn is accepted, then all hell breaks loose. Do check out the game Pichot against Giri, which I recorded a few months ago. You'll find that in the playlist. I'll put the link down there, where there's also a beautiful knight d4 move played by Anish Giri. And well, once you see these themes, then you know it gives you a handle on strategy in the opening. But do check out the course on Chessable. You'll find the link down there. More to come from the Kalashnikov very shortly.